to another episode of the Weekly Rushes, a rushed rush through the weekly rushes. And why break with tradition? It's been an odd week. We missed an episode back there, or did we? Maybe we didn't. Not entirely sure. It felt like we missed an episode. So what's happening in the world of film and streaming this week? Well, the first story is about the star of Shang-Chi, Simu Liu. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Simu Liu, who you know from Shang-Chi and Kim's Convenience. He's joining the cast of Greta Gerwig's, I can't believe this is actually happening, Greta Gerwig's film of Barbie. Yeah, Greta Gerwig, she of directing Lady Bird and Little Women. She is directing a movie based on Barbie and Ken. Margot Robbie is playing Barbie, Ryan Gosling is playing Ken, and now, as I say, Simu Liu is joining the cast. It's written by Greta Gerwig and her boyfriend, I'm not too sure if they're married, and Noah Baumbach. So I think we can pretty much guarantee that this is going to be deeply ironic, perhaps situated within a sort of contemporary New York of some kind, or maybe not. Maybe it's going to be an imaginative sort of fantasy of what if Barbie was a real life woman? Maybe it's going to be an old knock on the head type thing. I can't even fathom how they're going to structure this film. What do you think? Do you think they're going to go for the sort of fantasy end, or do you think they're going to go for a sort of really realistic art house kind of thing? And when you look at her previous films, they're far more kind of gritty and low budget, and this one, on the one hand, it really worries me, and on the other, it completely captivates me. Luca Guadagnino, the director of Call Me By Your Name and the remake of Suspiria. I thought the remake of Suspiria was really good. The girls were enormous fans of Call Me By Your Name. Obviously, it slightly had its ink pad blotted by the fact that Armie Hammer was so key to the film. He's directing a new film, but he's managed to sign up Zendaya, she of Euphoria and Spider-Man and what have you, and Josh O'Connor, who plays, the Prince of Wales in The Crown. I think he won an Emmy for that, didn't he? This is a new film that Luca Guadagnino says he had to make, and when you read the blurb or when you read the synopsis, you think, really? Did you have to make this? See what you think of this. So this is about a tennis player turned coach, Zendaya, who's taken her husband and transformed him from a mediocre player into a Grand Slam title player. But one day he finds himself standing across the net from another player, Patrick, who is Zendaya's ex and his best friend. A film about tennis makes sense, I think, when you're making something like King Richard, starring Will Smith, about the father of the Williams sisters. But I'm hard pushed to know what the must-make element of this is. What do you think? Luca Guadagnino is about to release, or is still prepping, the final release of Bones and All, which stars Timothée Chalamet, obviously reuniting with him after Call Me By Your Name. I think the big story here is that Zendaya is attached, but I'm still hard pushed to see what the must-see element of it is. Jordan Peele. Who's a fan of Jordan Peele? Obviously, he made the breakthrough box office and critical success Get Out, with Daniel Kaluuya at the centre of it, going to meet his white girlfriend's parents and proceeding to enter a deeply dark and twisted horror scenario, flecked through with an anti-racist kind of narrative. He then went on to make Us, which again was intrigued and fascinated by the underclass versus the upper class and the possibility of us having doppelgangers and what that means. And, there were very much sort of echoes of the slave trade in there. Again, he does intelligent horror where there's some kind of social commentary underpinning it or in there. It's not like it's obvious. He was also the exec producer of Candyman, which I thought was another prime example of horror genre film, but with underlying deep-seated messages and commentary on race issues. Images have just landed, 3 images, which I'll pop up on the screen, have landed to promote his new film, which is simply called Nope. The poster came out last year, and it has a sort of a cloud in the sky with, I think, ticker tape or something falling out of it. Well, these 3 images carry on the aerial fascination with Stephen Yeun, I can never pronounce his surname, the guy from The Walking Dead, Stephen Yeun, Daniel Kaluuya, and Kiki Palmer. 3 different images of them all looking skyward. What is it going to be about? What's it going to be? Big news for Star Wars fans, Ewan McGregor is going to be back. It's funny, isn't it? You hear that these things are happening, you don't believe they're going to happen, and then suddenly you're given a broadcast date. So, yeah, Disney have decided to schedule the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Yep, Ewan McGregor is reprising his role after the Revenge of the Sith. We're going to pick up his story. Now, I don't know what you feel about Obi-Wan Kenobi. I felt Obi-Wan Kenobi was always at his best when he was Alec Guinness. That's the Obi-Wan Kenobi I think of and I want, which is impossible because Alec Guinness is dead. Ewan McGregor, in the prequels, I have to say I didn't like his accent. His accent and voice was incredibly bizarre. So resurrecting him for this series, I think, is a bit of a gamble because, you know, with The Mandalorian, you've got the suit. With Boba Fett, you've got the suit. You know, and you've got, but with Obi-Wan, you've got a cloak. And of course, it's the stuff that's going on around him. I think this is going to be one really for the existing Star Wars fans. And having just seen Book of Boba Fett, and I have to confess, I was massively disappointed. 2 episodes in there that were good, starring the Mandalorian and the mini Yoda-like character. But I have to say, this is a hard sell for me, and I'm a Star Wars fan. Ryan Reynolds, who doesn't like Ryan Reynolds? Him over there, he doesn't like Ryan Reynolds. He's about to star in a new time travel project for Netflix. He's churning them out, isn't he? Red Notice, of course, was his. He recently was in a film called Free Guy, which I can't recommend enough. It's funny, it's entertaining, it's creative. There are some fantastic cameos in there. Ryan Reynolds is at his screamingly funniest best. And interestingly, this new film that he's going to make for Netflix, called The Adam Project, a time travel project, is directed by the guy behind the original Free Guy movie, but also one of the creative forces behind Stranger Things, Sean Levy. This story, let me read the synopsis. Ryan Reynolds' character crash lands on Earth, meets his younger self, and reconnects with his dead father, played by Mark Ruffalo. So we've got the Hulk in there, meeting up with Deadpool in a roundabout sort of way. Jennifer Garner's in there, and it's a funny, emotional father-son story with a sci-fi twist, travelling to meet your former self, trying to avert some kind of cataclysmic thing. You know, it's sci-fi, comedy sci-fi at its best, and I think it will be a must-see. We mentioned on our Instagram, Popcorn Junkies Instagram account, that there is a Michael Jackson biopic coming. Now, this is a biopic much in the same sort of vein as Bohemian Rhapsody, Rocket Man, the forthcoming Whitney Houston, in which the estate of the said subject, so in this case Michael Jackson's estate, have given the project their blessing. Now, for me, as soon as the estate of a person that the film's being made, a biopic of a certain, you know, public figure is being made, I always worry that this is only going to talk about the best bits. It's only going to talk about the music. It's only going to talk about the creative process. And it might home in on a very slightly sort of flawed or damaged aspect of their creativity rather than their personality. And as we all know, there was a huge amount of controversy around the character of Michael Jackson. It's being produced by Graham King, as I say. He produced The Departed. It's being written by John Logan, who's the man who wrote Ridley Scott's Gladiator. So there's some talent there. It's got some heft in terms of the production side of things. The word to use is hagiography, something that really just is a piece of puff that tells us all the best bits and kind of ignores all the bad bits. It was one of my problems with Bohemian Rhapsody. Not so much that problem with Rocket Man, because I think even though Elton John sanctioned it, I think he's more willing to kind of be in touch with his flaws and the more negative aspects of his story. That said, as we know, Bohemian Rhapsody nearly grossed $1 billion at the box office. Rocket Man, I think, did about 1/3 of $1 billion, 300,000 thereabouts. So there's money to be made in this. You can't help but wonder whether the Jackson estate are wringing out the final bits they can get from the Michael Jackson story. This next project is like manna from heaven. This is like if I had to decide who the most ideal people to have round for lunch were, and I had a choice of 2, I would invite Steven Spielberg and David Lynch, if we're talking of a filmic bent. Steven Spielberg is making a film called The Fabelmans, which is loosely based, though I'd have thought it's quite heavily based too, on his childhood. He's got a fantastic cast around him. He's got Paul Dano, who's playing a fictionalized version of his father. He's got Michelle Williams, who's in there to play a sort of fictional version of his mother. And he's got Seth Rogen in there to play his uncle. Now, of course, Spielberg's childhood was one in which he discovered film at a very young age. The reason his production company or his production outfit is called Amblin Entertainment is that his first short film was called Amblin. So I hope that this is going to be a film about a cinephile, and we're going to really, be able to indulge in the birth or the origin story of who must be, one of the last century's most successful and prolific directors. Obviously, director of E.T., Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jaws, Close Encounters, you name it, Schindler's List. But the new news on this is that he's cast another director who was a hugely important director for me in terms of influence, in terms of just me getting what I could get from his films, and that's David Lynch. David Lynch is going to be acting in The Fabelmans by Steven Spielberg. There's been no discussion of what the role is, but suffice it to say, David Lynch is as batshit crazy on screen as he is behind screen. So that has elevated it to another level of must-see for me. So we've already got the biopic of Michael Jackson. Now it's Bob Marley's turn, and we've got Kingsley Ben-Adir, who I have to confess I'm not familiar with. He was the breakout star from Regina King's directorial debut, I believe, One Night in Miami. He also was in Peaky Blinders, apparently, and The Comey Rule. He's to play Bob Marley in a film directed by Reynolds Marcus Green, who's the guy behind King Richard. So he's coming off a high. King Richard has gone down incredibly well. Will Smith has obviously been nominated for Best Actor. So Ben-Adir is going to be playing Bob Marley. So using the same litmus test as I used for the Michael Jackson project, who's behind this? His estate. Ziggy Marley and Rita Marley and Cedella Marley are producing, and presumably will be giving access to songs like Get Up, Stand Up, Buffalo Soldier, One Love, Could You Be Loved, and what have you. Again, an achingly brilliant story to be told, but do you care? Do you care that it's sanctioned by his estate? Does it matter? If we could just get some of the story, some of the rags to riches story, does that suffice? Am I being a really kind of purist film fan and going, I want an honest, warts and all portrait? Maybe I'm being a bit demanding. Any Blade Runner fans out there? Blade Runner is about to be given a serialization treatment. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this. Obviously, Blade Runner, the dystopian future film directed by Ridley Scott, starring Rutger Hauer as a kind of robot AI who's gone rogue, and the Blade Runner being Harrison Ford setting out to kind of hunt him down and shoot him, basically, to delete him. That was followed by Blade Runner 2049, directed by the Dune director, Denis Villeneuve. That starred Ryan Gosling. This series that's being made by Amazon Studios is called Blade Runner 2099, and we can only imagine that we keep parking dates further and further away from ourselves, because as we intercept those dates, things aren't as high-tech and as apocalyptic as perhaps the filmmakers thought, or maybe hoped they would be. Not too sure how I feel about a serialization of Blade Runner. It's a meticulously created fictional world, which, painstakingly observed, set design, production design, tech design, beautifully executed. Both films, the two films, I much prefer the original to Blade Runner 2049, but they both have huge merits and they do sit together rather neatly. Will this be a positive addition? What do you think? Are there any Blade Runner fans, Ridley Scott fans out there? He's involved with it, I think, as a producer. I'm not too sure if he's directing the first like he did with Raised by Wolves, but this is Amazon's shot across Netflix and other streamers' bows. This, and the fact that Lord of the Rings, the new series, based in a sort of much earlier manifestation of Middle-earth, that's landing later this year too. So Amazon are really cranking up their sort of big guns to shoot across streaming land. And so here's a little bit of a streaming roundup. We do a little film roundup, films of the week, but here's a little streaming roundup. So Better Call Saul's final season has been announced, that it's a final season. Obviously, Bob Odenkirk recovering from his heart attack earlier last year. It's the Breaking Bad spin-off, and the new series and the final series will be landing on Netflix in April, and there are just 7 episodes to be watched. So it'll be interesting to see how they wrap that story off. We didn't get on with it, I have to confess. I watched the first 2 or 3 episodes. I liked him, but I don't know why. It was like so immediately after Breaking Bad that I just missed Breaking Bad. But it'll be interesting to see. I think, does the series finish, or will the series finish at the point just before we see him in Breaking Bad? Russian Doll, a huge hit on Netflix, starring Natasha Lyonne as Nadia, funnily enough, in a sort of Groundhog Day scenario, a sort of dark comedy. Once again, watched the first episode, kind of got a bit annoyed by the Groundhog Day-ness of it. Do tell us what we were missing out there, Russian Doll. I like the idea of the Russian Doll, the idea of a doll in a doll in a doll, or a day in a day in a day, and trying to shift and adjust. As I understand it, they kind of got to the end of the first series and managed to get out of that Groundhog Day loop, so I'm not entirely sure how the second series will pan out. But they've released 2 first look images from season 2, and that'll be coming later this year. And finally, The Lazarus Project, starring Papa Esiedo. He's from I May Destroy You. It's a time travel, Christopher Nolan type thing. It's coming to Sky. Should he travel back? Shouldn't he travel back? Could he travel back and save a friend? A little bit like the Ryan Reynolds thing earlier, traveling back in time, but in altering time when he travels back. Could he lead the world towards global annihilation? Feel like I've seen all that stuff before. Feel like Christopher Nolan's done it very well. Time travel, could it be getting a little bit creaky? Not entirely sure, but Papa Esiedo is an absolutely brilliant actor, so maybe he'll lift it above that average time travel fodder. And so what are the films of the week? Well, Kenneth Branagh's been, well, he hasn't been busy actually, because this is a film he finished way before, or certainly before COVID kicked in. Death on the Nile. Astonishing cast: Penelope Cruz, Willem Dafoe, Judi Dench, Johnny Depp, French and Saunders, and contentiously Armie Hammer, where they've had to, in all the publicity, reduce his presence because, of course, all of the controversy around his drug taking, his abusive messages to his girlfriend, abusive behaviour, him caught up in all sorts of messages about cannibalism and all that kind of malarkey. He's a kind of poison chalice and hot potato, really. But this is another story, Agatha Christie story, directed by Kenneth Branagh, starring Kenneth Branagh as Hercule Poirot, with an enormous moustache. Possibly the biggest moustache ever in cinematic history, to the point that I feel like he's almost just doing it for jokes. He's just doing it for jokes. So if you fancy a really nice whodunit, Death on the Nile is there, and I'm sure it's going to be all that kind of possibility. Every single character is going to possibly be the murderer, and Hercule Poirot, maybe his moustache will solve the murder. And the next film is Marry Me, starring Owen Wilson and Jennifer Lopez, J-Lo. She's obviously very busy with Ben Affleck, recoupling, as they call it, recoupling. And she's obviously coming off the back of, I don't know if she did get an Oscar a nomination, but there was a lot of talk that she might for her role in Hustlers about the pole dancing strippers. Marry Me is a rom-com. She plays a singer. Right? No surprise there. She is on the rebound from a relationship, and she rather sort of, impulsively decides to marry someone she sees in the crowd, who's Owen Wilson, and then they go on a sort of their love relationship. This rom-com starts to pivot around. Can you ever marry someone who's really famous to someone who's just a face in the crowd? And the final film of the week is, if you fancy a more contemplative, thematic, serious watch, though albeit serious, incredibly rewarding, you might fancy Flee, as in not the little thing that bites you, but flee as in fled away from something. This is an animated documentary. I watched it last night, and it's about a man whose identity is kept anonymous, who fled Afghanistan during the Russian incarnation of it. And it's a film about being trafficked. It's a film about being a refugee. It's a film about losing your roots, trying to set new roots. He goes on a journey via Russia, back to Afghanistan, back to Russia. From Russia, he gets to Estonia, or nearly Estonia. And it's just a really telling portrait of, it makes you realise that all those people on those boats, those refugees, have vast, complicated and deeply traumatic backstories. And so it's a very thoughtful, though it sounds quite serious, it's very life-affirming too. And there you have this week's Rushed Rush through the weekly rushes. I'm going to finish my cold cup of coffee. Tell us what you think of the stories this week, and see you next week.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.